Welcome to the Savvy Leader Podcast, the place for growth, learning, and inspiration for leaders just like you. I'm your host, Kristin Gallatin, and each week we will dive into the grit, grace, and gratitude it takes to become the savvy leader you were always meant to be. Welcome to another episode of the Savvy Leader Podcast. Today, we are joined by Tony Peltier. He is a professional driver and wedding day DJ. And I am thrilled to have him because he's got such an incredible perspective on some of the things that I think we all take for granted. How does one become a professional driver? What does all of that entail? And I bet that it is way more complicated than we ever imagined. So, Tony, thank you for being here. Tell us how you got started and why you wanted to be a professional driver, and then you branched off into taking care of brides on their wedding day.
Yeah, life's kind of weird. Sometimes it tosses you a curveball, and sometimes it tosses you a lucky horseshoe. So, if you're a Marvel fan, my story, how I began my journey, starts actually as a Lyft and Uber driver. So I drove for Lyft and Uber on the weekends while I was still working a corporate job, and had started thinking about getting into the business for myself, and thought, okay, well, I really need to understand what is going to be my structure and my strategy if I go out on my own. What are going to be the expenses? What are going to be the requirements? All that type of stuff. So while I'm mulling this idea over, I start taking just scheduled rides that are going to and from the airport, thinking they have more of a consistent structure. I'm always going to get tipped, whether they get reimbursed or they have a corporate card. It's probably going to be a higher level client. I'm hoping that I can avoid a lot of the other drama, like, for instance, people that are drunk or high or don't have a car seat for their children. Feeling that naturally those things just wouldn't be in that scenario. So I had a woman that was a scheduled ride pick up from Maple Grove going to the airport. So I pulled into the driveway, and everything at the beginning seemed run of the mill. She came out, I introduced myself, I grabbed her luggage and put it in the trunk. And then when I sat in the front seat, I looked up in my rearview mirror and noticed that she had the door open, but she wouldn't get in. And so I just calmly said, is everything okay? Like, did you forget anything? And she's like, no, I think I have everything, but I'm just not sure. And I said, not sure about what? And she said, I'm just not sure. And then tears started to stream down both of her cheeks. And I said, is everything okay? And that's when she relayed to me that she had a ride a month prior, and that she had been attacked by her Uber driver and raped in the backseat of his car. And that's why she was reluctant to get in. So she said, I need to ask you a question, and I need you to promise to answer me honestly. And when I said that, as naive as I was, like, sure, what's up? She said, are you going to hurt me? And at that moment in my life, a lot of things had become crossroads for me. So my journey and my faith as a Christian man, my idea to start my own business, and then now facing a situation where a woman who, had all the trust in the world of a service like that had, been severely, attacked. It really led me to my purpose, my vision, and the fulfilling career that I have now, owning my own personal driving business that primarily serves women that are in a situation where they're riding by themselves. And about 70% of my clients currently fit that demographic. And most of the new clients that I get come from, thankfully, situations not that dire, but even situations with other services, even taxis, where the driver's too lazy to get off their butt to even help them with their bags or open the door or, engage in just friendly conversation, much less sometimes driving the entire time while they're just chatting on the phone with somebody else. So I really wanted to establish a business that I could be that primary person that's driving, providing them guidance on, what the marketplace looks like. And maybe I'm not the right fit for them, but at least educating them as well. But also being that point person that always answers their phone, that they have a local contact that they can trust, that's reliable, and that's safe. And so to this day, we're looking at my 8th year in operation next month. Tony goes there, continues to expand territory, and understanding that, there's just really nobody else out here doing what I do on the level of being ethical, legal, and really advocating for women.
Wow, that is an incredible story. And I remember the first time that we met, it was a few years ago, and you were very passionate about making sure that women knew that you were a safe driver, that you were someone who was going to be looking out for them and that they could feel comfortable entering your vehicle and that you were a stand-up guy. And that story is probably, unfortunately, more common than we'd like to admit, I think. It sounds like that kind of thing has been more in the press lately than 8 years ago. I'm just so grateful that someone of your integrity has opted to choose this type of business path. I think it is so unique. And I feel like, given that situation, you get to meet people and you see things from a way different perspective than most of us. Tell us a little bit about what the average day is like for Tony and his behind the wheel.
Sure. I would say most days I'm doing probably 2 to 4 rides. The majority of what I do is to and from the airport. But since COVID, it's really changed quite a bit too. Prior to COVID, I had people that were traveling really exclusively for business on a weekly basis. So they were going to the airport on Sunday night or Monday morning and coming back on Thursday night or Friday morning. It was very straightforward. It was very consistent. It was really easy to manage. Then COVID hit. A lot of my same customers then were working from home. So to keep presence of mind, I actually, fell right in line with that good old word pivot that became oh so popular. And I started to do their personal grocery shopping, and along with shopping for them, also delivering their groceries to them. Because I felt like it was a great way for me to stay front of mind. I had already known where they lived. They already trusted me. And now I could also be an advocate and a good steward for what they were spending, because then they didn't have all of these, emotional purchases at the checkout. And the great thing for me was I was able to save them even more money because I could shop on my memberships at Costco and Sam's Club so that they didn't have to buy their own. And yet they would still have access to those products and those quantities at a big box store. So that's really kind of where it started with COVID, but that also changed the dynamic. So I went from driving a little Toyota Prius to a 6-passenger minivan because now those same clients weren't traveling for business, or they weren't traveling as often for business, and they wanted me to now drive their families for their personal vacations or whatever trips they were taking through the airport. And I just needed more space for people and stuff. So it really worked out great. To fully answer your question, I do about 2 to 4 rides a day. Like I said, most of them are to and from the airport, but I do also I do handle medical rides too. More popularly, it's becoming people that are flying in from out of state that need a ride down to Rochester for treatment at Mayo. They don't have friends or family here. Maybe they're coming in really late or early, so they don't have a shuttle service that can run either. So I'm really trying to fill that gap for those types of rides as well.
I love that you are so responsive to the needs of your clients and the changes and trends and our culture. I think that's incredible. And I think that speaks to your wisdom as a business owner. So the story of how you began is fascinating to me, of course, and very moving. At the same time, what are some of the things that have surprised you once you got going? And you probably took you a little time to get your bearings and get your routines in place and get all of your connections established and setting up calendars. But what are some of the things that you came across that were really unexpected? Have you had any really wacky requests or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say on the grand scheme of things, vehicle wise, it really surprised me that it really didn't matter at the time that I started out with a little Toyota Prius. Nobody really that I was driving really cared that I wasn't driving a black Lincoln, that I wasn't dressed in a suit and tie, you know, that they weren't getting that traditional chauffeur slash limo service. Um, Price wise, I've always situated myself about 15 to 30% more than Lyft and Uber, which is also at a discount at about 50% what they would pay if they actually did have a traditional black car service. So it feels like I fill the gaps pretty well on both the people that are trying to budget shop as well as those that are really looking for that personal service that don't have to pay to have the nicest, shiniest vehicle just to drive them. On the wacky side of like requests and those things, I would say I've had a few. The two that I like to share most often because I think they're pretty unique. I had a gentleman who contacted me same day, realized once he had gotten to work, driving from Blaine to Egan, that he had the only other set of keys to his wife's car, so she couldn't go to work, and called me and asked me if I would be so kind as to drive them back to her in Blaine. And I just so happened to be at the airport, so I was only 10 minutes away from him anyway, so that worked out really, really well for both of us. And he paid me generously for it. Another one was really interesting. It was a young mom who had just given birth. She was at home. Her husband worked for or traveled for work, and she didn't want to wake up her baby in the middle of nap time in the afternoon to have to go to her clinic to submit a urine sample because they had her on a medication and they wanted to figure out correct dosage. So she was doing urinalysis once a week. So she asked me if I would stop by the clinic, get her kit, bring it to her for her to produce her specimen and then bring it back to the clinic for her, which I thought was really interesting. And she, preface it by saying, I hope you don't think this is gross, but it just so happened in a previous life, I used to work in a medical lab. So that stuff
Oh.
doesn't affect me at all. And I said, as long as you make sure that lid's on tight, we're good. So it's things like that you could never imagine would ever come up on your radar. But I think owning my own business and being a small business where I can be adaptive and understanding and really have that first conversation to determine, am I a good fit for what you're needing, is so key. That I think there's just so many things that we have just as humans that pop up every day that it's like, I wonder if I would even be able to find somebody that could help me with this. So I think it's humbling and it's also awe-inspiring when I have somebody that reaches out and says, I have a question. I'm not sure if you're the right fit, but this is my situation. This is my scenario. What do you think? For me, it allows me to expand as a business owner, but it also allows me to serve my community in a way that it's not really advertised, but I can help.
You are just building relationship after relationship after relationship. And those are the best clients to have always. The people that trust you and your willingness to just go above and beyond is so impressive. Thank you for what you do. Now I
Absolutely.
know.
And it's really fun too, because I can use those stories as my own stories with other clients. So now
Hmm.
it becomes an experience where it's not just I'm driving you point A to point B, but hopefully you're finding my service enjoyable as well.
Oh, of course. Of course, of course. And I'm sure that they do. How could they not? You're incredible insights. I know the times that I've spent with you, you're always a wealth of knowledge in various different topics, I think is pretty incredible. With that, though, you've got two very distinct brands. So you're not just a professional driver, you're also specifically a wedding day DJ. How did that come about, and how do those two things kind of work together?
Sure. So I'd say if you're familiar with what a Venn diagram is, where you have areas that overlap each other, the main thing that I have going for me where those two businesses intersect is that I'm still advocating for women, which is always going to be the foundation of anything that I have my hands in. And I have a grand plan to eventually own 5 businesses, but that's a little too much to be included in this podcast today. But with my DJ business, the great thing is that I really want to focus on the bride. You know, whether that be a situation where it's a same-sex marriage and they're both men or they're both women, whatever. But whoever is assuming the role of the bride in that relationship, I want to be able to build that reliability and that trust with them to say, okay, here's the things we need to talk about. So my initial consultation always includes, what are your wants? What are your needs? And what is your budget? Because those are the 3 things that are going to determine on those overlaps of what can we do, what are possibilities, and what are some things that just aren't going to fit either in your time, your needs, your budget, you know, the, you know, delivering on the expectations of family and friends that are going to be there. There's also an image that's needed to be upheld when it comes to a wedding. And I think that's a part that people really don't talk about is it's not just traditions. It's not just, let's say, religious belief and structure and how that needs to go, but also what are people going to think? How much am I catering to my clientele that's going to be there versus it's my day and I'm going to do what I want? So I think it's just understanding that dynamic that then leads you to answers for those other questions that come up automatically.
Okay, so you are incredibly customer service focused. What are some things that guide you in that? I mean, you've got some deeply grounded morals there that sound like they're really keeping you in line and keeping that client focus, and women especially. Help me understand what philosophies are guiding that for you or helping you along with that.
Sure. I think with anything that I want to be involved with, of course, stating again, advocacy for women is just top notch for me. And I think where that comes from is not only am I experienced with that first client for Tony Goes There for my driving business, but also just having strong women in my life that have really developed me into being a more aware male than I think most are out in society. I think also understanding that, and my wife jokes about it all the time, that I'm the female in our relationship. The sappy commercials come on and I'm the one shedding tears and those kinds of things. She gives me guff for it all the time. But I think it's that understanding of how do I want the world to be and what power do I have to change it for the better? And I think it's probably also a situation where family wise, I have identical twin girls. So there's always that barometer that I'm measuring myself against on how would I want somebody to treat my daughters if they were in the same situation? If it's, a flight delay and I'm picking up somebody's, underage child, because I do that sometimes where a parent is saying, I have a 17-year-old daughter that's flying in unaccompanied. I only trust you to pick her up. I need to make sure that I'm delivering on that, because I'm going to be in a situation where I'm alone in a vehicle with a minor of the opposite sex. So if I'm building on that trust and reliability, how am I delivering on that as well?
Oh my gosh, so true. You are just so grounded and full of energy as well. Like you seem like you're someone that gets up and then you are in full speed ahead all day
Yeah.
long. Is that kind of your life?
Especially when it comes to the DJ side of things. So a lot of people don't know this, but I was a former semi-professional dancer in my 20s and actually auditioned on the show So You Think You Can Dance and did my solo on TV. So when it comes to the DJ side of things, I went to school for broadcasting, so I'm not unfamiliar when it comes to being in front of a microphone or behind one. But I also like to add to that to where I'm engaging the crowd in the line dancing stuff. So that people are engaged, they're staying longer, specifically for weddings. You're renting that venue until 11 p.m. or midnight. You want to make sure that your guests are sticking around till as close to that quitting time or that closing time as possible. Otherwise, what are you doing to fill that time? So being engaging, showing empathy. Empathy is so huge for me. I want to make sure that people are having a great experience, not because I need them to have a great experience, but because I want them to have a great experience.
That's so awesome. All right, now let's switch gears just a little bit. You touched on your competitors there, Uber, Lyft, and I know that there's been a lot of regulations and other things that have come into play so recently, self-driving cars even. How are
Yeah.
all of those things impacting what you do? I mean, you are incredibly unique, no question, but how do you get all that message out there about all the wonderful things you can do that any of those other guys can't do?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is answering my phone. A lot of the really great opportunities I've had is just because I pick up my phone when somebody calls me. I can't tell you how many times people have said, you're the fourth, you're the fifth, you're the sixth person that I've called that's actually answered their phone. And in those cases, it's resulted in some pretty significant fares because they have specific things that they need done. And now they have a person that they can trust because they know that I'm there and I'm making myself available for them, even if it's something that comes up on a moment's notice versus, my whole philosophy of trying to pre-schedule everything. So trying to have that flexibility, I think is one. Um, you know, uh, there's just so much ick out in the world, and specifically when it comes to transportation, there's a lack of there is a lack of regulation, but I also think that there's a lack of responsibility. Um, you know, Many drivers, I'll say, with, in regards to like Lyft and Uber, because you're a subcontractor, most, what is it? I think the last statistic was 90% of drivers for Lyft and Uber drive less than 15 hours a week. So it's not their full-time gig. They're not investing into it like it's a business. They're not even running it as a side gig. Most of them are using it to, well, I'm going this direction on my way to my full-time job. I'll grab a passenger or two and drop them off before I go into work because then it helps supplement against my gas or my insurance or my car payment, those kinds of things. So it's really not viewed in their eyes as a business. And so they're not orienting themselves as a business owner. I think in situations like taxi companies, and now there are very few around because of everything that happened with COVID, either taxi companies went out of business or they got swallowed up by a bigger competitor. Um, on the regulation side of things, they are very regulated when it comes to the state, county, and the airport requirements. The problem they run into, or that people run into when they're using taxis, is just like with Lyft and Uber. You never know who you're going to get. You don't know if they've been driving 12 or 13 hours already. You don't know if they know how to take a shower or clean their car. You know, yes, they have to pass an inspection for the state for their vehicle that it's in operating order. That doesn't have anything to do with the cleanliness of it. So addressing those issues and trying to meet people where they are to make sure that I'm not just meeting, but I'm exceeding expectations. That's, I think, been the great recipe for me with not only cultivating a culture where I'm having people as repeat customers on the driving side of the business, but also they're telling other people and becoming referral partners for me because they want to support me, because they know that I have that message out there, and because I'm delivering on the expectations that we've discussed.
That's great. I'm curious though, what are your thoughts on the future of all of that? Like, especially self-driving cars. That's all over the news. I'm just curious what your take is on all of that.
Yeah, I think right now I think they're on generation 5 or 6, but I think we're still in the infancy of that whole thing as far as integrating driverless vehicles with the general, man-powered driving population that's out there. I think for things to really change, there's going to have to be a significant investment in infrastructure where we're really separating driverless vehicles into their own lane with like a cement barricade that's keeping them from integrating into other traffic. That way, if there is a mechanical, technological failure at some point, it's not putting everybody else at risk. But I also think it's the opposite. I think that there are a lot of distracted drivers, whether it's them trying to steer the wheel and eat their bagel and drink their coffee at the same time, or they're literally just holding their phone, even though it's illegal in the state of Minnesota. I think that both sides of that issue really need more discussion and more infrastructure. But realistically, my philosophy when I'm out on the road is I don't have to drive angry and I don't have to drive in a rush because my time is planned. I know the trends of traffic. I know how to handle weather. And so I think it's when people think about hiring a driver, it's not necessarily, hey, do I have somebody that knows how to get from point A to point B? I think it's also, how do they navigate when other challenges are thrown in their way? A delay with a flight, fresh coating of snow, detours because of construction. Those are the things that I really pride myself on to make sure that I'm informed and I'm prepared when those things are going to come about, to make sure that I'm reacting accordingly prior to having to be reactionary while I'm driving them.
Oh my gosh. Well, that leads me to the question then, how do you plan out your days, especially with all of the flight, all the changes, like you just touched on, transportation is a complicated ecosystem. And
Yeah.
one thing can throw off the whole day. How do you plan your day? What tools and resources do you use, or what kind of things do you do to make sure that you are on track and on time and fulfilling all your promises?
Sure. So I think with having a lot of data, I can trend pretty accurately already on knowing what drive times usually are. Unless it's a brand new place that I've never driven before, sometimes I'll actually pre-drive it. So if somebody's 40 minutes out, I'll make it a plan to drive out that direction to know kind of what's the lay of the land. Is there any current construction going on? What's the situation with, my surroundings? Is it all flat? So if I know that I'm going to get a ton of rain or I'm going to be driving in the snow, I'm probably going to have to deal with drifting, not just plows being out. But I think when it comes to the airport, a really great resource that I use is called flightaware.com. So I can track your flight status, and it literally will update from the time that your plane touches down to the time that it's at the gate to the time that you're deboarding. And I can use those increments to then very accurately project when you should be at the curb with your baggage, whether you've checked luggage or not, so that I know how close to the airport I need to be so I can be as reactionary as possible without having you to have to wait for me. You're hiring me to drive you. I need to be where you are when you need me to be there. It's not the opposite.
Oh, well, what do you know?
Yeah.
That is five-star service, no question. Okay, so we are on the cusp of the holiday season, which I know is a terrible travel time. And also, spring break is right around the corner for you. And you talked about that being a monstrous season. Tell us a little bit about that. What can travelers know? How can they better plan, and how can they find you, of course? But talk a little bit about how you manage those times of hectic travel seasons when it's so busy, and especially because it's right here and right now.
Yeah. I would say the holidays right now is kind of the cultivation for the busier part of my year, which is absolutely spring break. That is the pinnacle. But I would say pieces of advice that I could offer as a professional driver for those that are traveling, whether it be holidays or spring break, just when it's busy at the airport, period, is know where you're coming in. Are you coming into Terminal 1 or are you coming into Terminal 2? Know what amenities are available for you. If you're going really early, coffee shops and stuff probably aren't open. So you're going to want to make sure you have breakfast beforehand so that, you're not getting hangry waiting around for your gate. Another great thing to keep in mind too is even if you have checked luggage, as long as you have decent mobility and hauling your bags around a little bit isn't going to be a chore. I always I can't say it enough. Picking up on the departures level, even though you're coming in on an arrival flight, is night and day. Sometimes the arrival line for the airport will trickle all the way out to the highway. So it can be up to 40 minutes of waiting in line to pick you up down at baggage claim versus if you're able to take an escalator or an elevator up one floor to the departures level, I can literally be in and out in 5 minutes. So it's like I say, it's a law of thirds. A third of what I do is actually performing my service, is actually driving you. A third of it is all the admin stuff, collecting your information, making sure I'm scheduling things correctly with the times you need, and then sending out the reminders so that if there's anything that changes with your flight, we both know about those changes and we can adjust. And then that last third is always education. How am I best suited to know what's going on at the airport or other places that I drive, and being able to relay that to you, not only in a timely manner, but also with accuracy and efficiency to make sure you're informed along with having an informed driver.
Picking up in the departure lane, what an incredible hack. That is such great advice. And all of that is a testament to the incredible business owner that you are and the professional out in the field and on the roads. We're grateful to have you. So talk a little bit about, I know you touched on, you've got a 5 business plan. Can you give us any hints at all on some of the things you're thinking about branching out into, or some other things that might be on your horizon?
Yeah, absolutely. So the original idea was that I was going to start 5 businesses in 10 years. Well, we're now on 8 years with my driving business, so I have some time to make up for. I started my DJ business about a year and a half ago, and that's moving right along a little bit slower than I anticipated. But I also I note that some of those challenges have been with the economy. People have been pretty tight with what they want to spend on their wedding overall, not just with the DJ. But ultimately, I want to get back to the roots of the things that I went to school for, specifically broadcasting. So I want to be able to get back into voiceover work that I did a while ago. I want to be able to do personal speaking engagements. I think that I have a lot of experience, knowledge, advice that I can offer to certain, subsects of culture, as well as to certain demographics that would really hold a high amount of value in what I can offer. Um, and then one of the other things that I want to do is I want to start a nonprofit that helps out with the things that I advocate for. Right now, philanthropically, with my driving business, I do support a nonprofit called Stories Foundation. What they do here locally is they help women escape their sex trafficker. And when they're ready to do so, they help them to plug into resources so they have stable housing, a stable job, care for their children if they have any. And I definitely like to be able to plug in and be the transportation element of that, because transportation in those situations is a barrier. It's a very real barrier for people that are in an at-risk situation. And so I want to be able to do more than just perform the driving services. I want to be able to be a part of on that back end organization as well, with not only being able to advocate as an individual, but also as somebody who has connections for other people to advocate on my behalf as well.
Stories Foundation is close to my heart too. So I love that you're engaged with them, because I think you're so right that you as a person have a unique service to offer in a very sensitive situation, and you're the best guy for the job. No question.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love your five. I love your five plan. I think that's incredible. And I think all of the things that you touched on are so well suited for you. And I can see it already. I can see Tony goes there up on stage talking about things from your incredibly unique perspective, and just the
Yeah.
way you go to business, the things that you do and what you have to offer, and the way that you approach all of your different situations, I think is just incredible. Thank you, Tony. All right. I got one last question for you, and this one is a good one.
Okay.
What is one piece of advice you would love to give any budding young business owner, or what's something that you wish you had known then that you know now that you would like to share with our audience?
Sure. I think the biggest part of my success as a personal driver was having those experiences that I had as a Lyft and Uber driver. It showed me a lot about understanding how the difference of 3 or 4 minutes per ride can change the entire spectrum of how you make money and how you efficiently drive, all while still being safe. Um, I guess the best advice that I could give would be, if somebody is coming in, let's say they're right out of high school or right out of college, they're trying to start their own business, they have that entrepreneurial spirit, is do your homework. Study the people that have already done what you want to do. Learn from their experiences. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. You don't want to spend more time on things that aren't going to offer value. You want to spend time on the things that are going to help you build. And keep in mind too that it's not just building a business, it's building you. You're learning, you're growing, you're thriving, you're figuring out how to work through challenges. And I think that resiliency part and that critical thinking part are two major areas that are missed so much for those that are like, oh, I'm going to go work for myself. Yeah, that's a great idea. But remember, when you say work for yourself, it's still work. And so I think all too often we like to see the bright, shiny thing at the end of the work, and not understand as much about what it took to get there. And so my best advice would be prepared to work, but be prepared to work efficiently. And anybody that you can in your circle of influence that is pulling you or pushing you in the right direction, listen to them, follow them. What my wife likes to say all the time, working in the churches, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should be listening twice as much as we talk. And I guess
Yeah,
that's where I'll cut it off. Yeah.
I love it. And you're so right. You do have to work. Why? Because you got to earn your Saturdays, right? You got to earn those Saturdays by working every day all week long. You don't just get to slack off all week and then still have a day off, whatever day off that is for you. Do you work 7 days a week, or do you have regular set schedules or hours that we should know about?
Yeah, it's not really regular just because it's a very demand-based service when it comes to
Hmm.
the driving business. On the DJ side of things, I've come to realize, and of course I'm still learning too on that, that most weddings don't look at live music versus a DJ until about 4 months out, which I
Oh.
traditionally thought was a lot. I had a lot more lead time than that, but that
Hmm.
dynamic has changed quite a bit. So I would say for me, I try to block off one day or at least one half of a day to really stay on top of my admin things. When you're running your own business, you're wearing all your hats. So I still got to make sure that I'm staying up on my mileage, that I'm, putting my receipts in for my expenses, that I'm keeping things accurate for when I'm doing quarterly or year end tax stuff so that I'm not scrambling to do 6 months of work in 2 weeks.
Mm. So true. So, so true. Well, I hope you get at least one full day off each week.
Yeah.
You deserve
There's
a
always
day.
that theory. It's just a matter of,
Yeah.
is the dynamic of the demand going to help me deliver on that?
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. That is so true. Tony, where can we find you? You've got two incredible websites. I know. Are there other places? Share with us your websites and then any other place we can find you to get in touch with you and book our next drive.
Sure. Or event or both. Yeah.
Yes.
One thing I want to touch on quick that I didn't talk about is that whole Venn diagram thing. So
Oh, yeah.
if I talk to somebody and they're saying, well, we already have a DJ or we're looking at going in a different direction. The great
Hmm.
thing about my two businesses is I can then switch gears and say, oh, well, have you thought about hiring a wedding shuttle? And
Hmm.
it's so key because a lot of weddings now you have family that's coming in from out of town or they're coming from across town. And if you have that situation where your venue is different than where your hotel is, having somebody that's reliable that can shuttle people back and forth is key. So it's nice that I can be able to deliver on both fronts when it comes to that type of situation. As far as finding me though, my main websites for my driving business, Tony Goes There, is simply www.tonygoesthere.com. For my DJ business, because the focus should be on you and your day, my company is called My Day DJ, and it's found at www.mydaydj.com. Otherwise, feel free to Google either of them. I'm also with my driving business. I'm an accredited business that's also A plus rated with the Better Business Bureau, so you can find me there. I'm also a registered LLC owner for both businesses with the state of Minnesota, so you can always go through the Secretary of State to verify my validity there.
Hmm.
And if you're really into reading reviews, I have almost 400 five-star reviews on Google for my driving business. So feel free to go out there and grab a box of Kleenex because some of them are going to make you tear up.
Aw. I will absolutely do that. And I'll include links to all of your websites and everywhere we can find you and those reviews, no doubt, to help people get in touch with you the next time they need to book a DJ or a driver for any and all situations because you are the guy that goes there.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll just touch on quick is, keep in mind that when you're working with a small business, sometimes my response time is a little bit delayed because I have a lot of irons in the fire. But at the same time, note that you're always going to get a response. And really, it basically it comes down to one statement. It starts with a conversation. So if you want more information, reach out to me. I'm happy to do that via a direct call on my cell phone, calling back from a voicemail message, or via text message. Of course, email too. But um, for me, it's just I want to be able to build that relationship. Relationships is what it's all about. I don't want clients. I want people that start as clients and become friends.
Awesome. That's so great. Thank you so much again, Tony. I'd love to have you back sometime in a few months, maybe after your whirlwind of spring break, we can touch base again because I really want to dive into a little bit more about your life philosophies and some of the things that make you the man who you are. If you don't mind,
Yeah,
I'd love to see you again.
that'd be fantastic. I appreciate it. I'm open to any invitation.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Tony. We'll be seeing you again real soon. Take care.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Savvy Leader Podcast. Be sure to check the description below for any links or resources we mentioned today. And for even more inspiration and tools to help you on your own leadership journey, come on over and join the conversation in the Savvy Leaders Lounge. That's savvyleaderslounge.com. And we'll see you next time.